Bruce Kittle here with Hidden Pearls Podcast. We have Bob Taylor on. We're going to get into all of that in a moment. We're super excited to have him, and also the lovely and always exclusive Emma Kittle Ponce. So, well, before we got on, we were talking about you were wishing Emma congratulations on her wedding. So thank you and happy anniversary to you. So I'll do a little bio on Bob, but anyway, his anniversary just came up. We both had anniversaries. He was on the 4th and we were on the 7th. And I think you said 36 years, but he got married after he'd already enrolled in navigator school with the Air Force. And then it was a battle to get a little break in there. And the only time off they'd give you was the 4th. So you were married on the 4th of July. So that's pretty cool with the whole story that we're providing. So anyway, well, happy anniversary. We're very grateful to have you. So Bob Taylor.
Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, welcome. So
thank you very much. I am absolutely grateful for the opportunity to be here with you.
We like that. This is a pretty, we have a lot of stuff to cover, so we might be doing a part 2, but I just want to put a little
buzz in there. So, all right, you graduated in 1986 from Michigan State University out of the proud and one and only Big Ten. Well done. We're all Iowa grads, but she's an OU grad, but that was kind of accidental. But anyway, and then immediately joined the Air Force in 1987, I believe, right after that. So we're going to come back to that. But you were also CEO of Alliant Healthcare Products, which works in medical cells a lot with the VA. So you can kind of unpack that for us. You're the founder of Patriot Promise Foundation. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And then as part of that, I think within that umbrella or conglomeration of veteran services that you're working on, you are the author of From Service to Success, a book that's focusing on and highlighting and trying to help veterans more successfully transition from their service into the community when they come back either from military service and or including deployment. So and we really want to get to that because that was really a fit for us because we've kind of discussed.
Sound like I'm very, very busy.
There you
are. You sound like you are very busy.
You're out
you wrote this whole thing.
Yeah, making a difference.
We have a lot of notes in it.
Yeah.
We marked her up pretty good.
So over the last 2 years, we've been hosting veterans. We've done a lot. We partnered with Merging Vets and Players, which you and I have kind of talked about a little bit, which that organization, a lot of the same themes about making sure people have a team when the uniform comes off and that kind of thing, working with professional athletes and that. So we were very interested to kind of get to this. So before we get into that, just as a little background question, I'm always kind of curious. So we want to spend a little bit of time and not your whole story, but I'm always curious kind of your upbringing, kind of where you grew up and your family structure, and maybe kind of one or two of the core lessons that shaped you as a person coming out of your kind of family of origin.
Sure. So I'm a Midwestern. I grew up in Saginaw, Michigan, and that's how my whole family went to. My parents went to Michigan State. My dad was a Korean wartime veteran. He was a corporal, mortician, and worked in he was stationed in Germany, and he was obviously a huge influence on me. And my uncle was a full bird colonel in the Army, and those two men were significant role models for me. Of the life lessons, my dad was hit with Lou Gehrig's disease when I was 9 years old, and he was 39 years old. And I think about it now, just what a young man he was when he first got that. And a lot of people, it's a terminal disease, and a lot of people pass away within a year or two. And my dad fought that disease for 12 years. And so I was 21 years old when he passed away. And that can't help but impact a young man as he goes through that. But I will tell you, in retrospect, the courage, the example of courage that I saw in my father, how he dealt with that, and what that taught me as far as resilience and the ability to overcome adversity. I'd never choose that path for anyone, but I think that really forged a pretty big sense of perseverance in my life. And I'll share the story. Senior year at Michigan State, on my way to one of my engineering classes, and I heard my dad's voice in the back of my head. He had passed away a couple years earlier, And it was just him saying, I always wish I would have learned how to fly. And he and I shared that passion and never made it happen. And just so happened I was walking in front of the Air Force recruiting station when I heard that voice. And I was like, I'm not going to let that happen. I took a right turn, and 9 months later, I was in the officers training school.
Wow. There you go. So, and you hadn't really thought about
Wow.
it too much. I mean, it kind of bubbled around, but like you hadn't really made a firm decision, but you just happened to be at the right place.
I hadn't really thought about an Air Force career. I thought about learning to fly. I thought about that passion. It's something that you can't shake. I call it fish you got to swim.
Mhm.
And when you have that part of you that wants to fly, it's unshakable. But I never really thought about an Air Force career until I just happened to walk in, and I, in life, I've always found that when things fall together, when things come together, you're headed in the right direction.
Right.
And I think in that instance, everything just kind of fell together.
Well, that's really true. We talk a lot about that because, part of the podcast for us is transitions. And when we talk with veterans, it's a lot of the transitions from civilian life into the military, transitions they faced while in the military, whether it's deployments or not, and then transitions back out, and a lot of those kind of things. And as they're trying to make some decisions, sometimes it's super murky and cloudy, but there are other times when it feels like a bolt of lightning strikes, the path is revealed, and there's like, no, you just know this is where you have to go. Your heart's in it, your spirit's in it, your mind's in it, and you just, there you are. So
what'd your mom say?
So I was 26 years old, and I think about that because my son he's on his way to Haiti tomorrow. And of all the places in the world that I would want my son, Haiti is pretty low on the list. But over the probably 6 weeks prior, he's been in the Ukraine, Turkey, Syria, Ethiopia, South Sudan. He is part of a mission for humanitarian aid. It's a company called GEM, Global Empowerment Mission. And so he does all their video work and sets all these things up. And I think about it, he's 30 years old. And I keep telling my wife, who absolutely freaks out about all these places that he's going, I remind her where we were and what I was doing when I was his age. And I think it's harder on parents than it is on the family members, right?
Yep. Well,
But
that's pretty cool.
Coach, you brought up these transitions, and I've been speaking to groups, and I've been pointing out when we're in the military or in athletics, we train, or I'll say in the civilian world, we work, we achieve, we get promoted. We work, achieve, we get promoted. And then when we change jobs, we usually take a lateral move or a promotion, and we just keep going. But when we're in athletics or the military, we train, achieve, promote, train, achieve, and we achieve these great things. And then when we change, we don't go lateral. We have to go to the bottom rung in a civilian world, a brand new thing that has no real relationship to what we're having to do. And just that change requires a complete new mindset that I think veterans and athletes are ill prepared for. And I don't care how good you are, there are going to be times of struggle for that.
Well, indeed. And so let's we can kind of roll into that then. And so, because I think with those transitions and exactly what you're talking about, so there's some core elements about it. So, and I mean, as we get into that, so we'll come back to the Alliant Healthcare and all that kind of stuff, because we're going to focus on some of the issues that the vets are facing. So when we do that, so the opening of the book, you have this quote from Churchill, which I've always loved that quote. And so in that he says, "Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Never, never, never give up." And I think that is kind of that motto, because I think of all the military personnel that I've had the benefit of kind of being around and talking to and all that kind of stuff, like on the weekly meetings for MVP and that, their training all about the military was that same kind of philosophy. You'd figure out how to overcome things and you do it, and there's never say never and all that kind of stuff. But yet when they get out, there's this kind of disconnect. And I think one of the messages that I got out of your book, and I think it's really clear, is that, we go in at 26 or whatever age, and we're raised in civilian life, and different people are different. Some people go in with no military connections, and then other people go in with a long time of men and women in their family. And so they've had some of those supper table conversations about the military, so they might. But then when you go in, there's the military training, and it does this thing. And you talk about self-image, and you talk about this paradigm. And so when you enter the military, they completely restruct all of your cultural norms, your values, how you operate, everything from making a bed to cleaning a gun to whatever it is that you're doing for them. And so you have this entirely new relationship, and then it gives you this whole new tribe. And then you talk a lot about mission and purpose. So I'm just kind of setting some of these things up. But the military life, as difficult as it can be, and is, I guess, scary, and obviously people make that sacrifice and all the things that happen. But there is this notion that you're really committed to something with a team that has your back, to a purpose that is greater than yourself. And everyone I talked to, for the most part, found it unbelievably fulfilling, very rewarding, have a strong sense of commitment to our country, and particularly to the military and to the men and women that they were working with. And so you have all of that. And so now you've gone into the military, completely reoriented the way you think and how you operate and how you live and how you relate to people. And here's your family and friends out here, and they've just stayed kind of the same, in civilian. So you go through all that. And then if we layer on, deployment and or, the bundle of other things that can happen to you in the military. And then when you come back out, now you completely torqued everything, and you put on these glasses in the military and you see the world in this way and how to operate and live. And all of a sudden then you walk out, you've lost your rank, you've lost your core tribe, you've lost the purpose, you've lost your mission, all of those things. I still remember, there was a staff sergeant, and he used to, control all this stuff and had all these people and doing all that kind of stuff. And then when he got out, his first job, it was so menial. It was brutal. He and I really felt for that, because here you are, you have all this authority, and then you come out and you're a little bit older than some of the people you're working with. You don't have all that employment history. And so you end up in some positions with, newbies, and you're used to operating huge budgets, a lot of personnel, life or death decisions, and you lose all of that. And so there's that huge disconnect about the transition coming back. So why don't you set us up a little bit about, set the case, for why your book was needed and why you wrote it and some of the things you were trying to get to.
So I'll just reflect on some of when we go into the military, the one thing that the military does better than anyone else in the world is train. They train us, they take us, and they remold us from many to one. So we all have our individual goals and aspirations, and they take it and they just squeeze it down to, now you have one mission. And now there's some differences. Everyone has their different capabilities, skill sets, and everything, but they really refine us into this new mission and purpose. And then what happens is we become really, we become excellent at what we do, and we perform at the highest of levels. And so some of my speeches, I talk about how much more meaningful our lives are when we're part of a team and we can overcome challenges as part of a team. And that's everything we do in the military. That's exactly it. I think about the first combat mission that we're flying. We're flying B-52 at night, 200 feet over the Iraqi terrain, and we turn on our bomb run, and I look in the forward-looking camera, and I see this sparkly stuff. And I'm like, well, what is that? It looked kind of like the remnants of a firework, that we just saw a few days ago. And I realized, oh, yeah, they're shooting at us. We don't see that in training. But, we still went forward. We struck the target. We had to deal with hung weapons. Number 3 aircraft missed their radio check-in. Lead
You
aircraft.
lost the motor. Didn't you lose? I thought you lost one of your motors on the way out.
Yeah, we lost one of our engines right after takeoff. The lead aircraft had its tail shot off over the target. So you can actually, there was an F-4 flying overhead. He was a wild weasel, and they do surface to air suppression. He couldn't believe that we made it across the target. There was so much anti-aircraft fire. And so I tell that story and I remind people it's not because we thought we were going to be heroes or anything like that. It's because we were trained. We were just trained at everything that happened that night. We had already trained for how to deal with losing an engine, how to deal with hung weapons, how to deal with, aircraft emergencies, whatever it was, we were trained. And so there's a couple aspects of that. I would have never done anything to let my crewmates down. I worked my butt off to be exceptionally good at being a navigator and a radar navigator. And that's because I wanted my crew to be proud of me. I wanted for us to be able to handle the most challenging missions. And that's one thing that's common among veterans is some veterans, when you hear about someone falling on a grenade, it's not because it's a hero thing. It's because they would never let their buddy down. They would never let their teammate down, and that they'll sacrifice their lives for it. And I mean, that's a calling that's hardwired for the rest of your life. That's something that you can't recreate in the civilian world.
I really appreciate this, like all the parts in your book where, like, leading up to this point though, where you were just saying how you were really looking for the camaraderie, and it was cool how through that and like even these stories that you're telling, it really highlighted the relationships that you did make.
Right. And that's, I just reconnected through Facebook with a guy I haven't seen in probably 30 years. And it's like no time has gone by. And I can remember going through officers training school with them and navigator training with them and just how close our families were. We watched our kids grow up, and just to see, to have that connection still after that long a time is a pretty amazing thing.
Yeah. Bob, I just have to, out of that first story that is in the book, here's the one part that really kind of jumped out is like, holy shit. So if I think on that first combat mission, there were 3 B-52s. And then, of course, you have to time it just right because the first folks have to drop, they explode, there's some shrapnel, and then number 2 has to come in. And so the timing between the distance and flight of those 2 planes has to be exact. And then you're number 2, I think. And the same thing for you. When you drop, it has to be exact. And you have I thought, a 10-second window in which to make that
plus
drop.
or minus 10 seconds.
Right. And then what I remember, though, you went through that first one as you were doing it, because I think you were going around a corner or something, and then you were watching it, and you were 4 seconds off, and then you go, oh, yeah, we lost that first engine. So you didn't have the same airspeed that you would have under all the normal calculations. So then you had to adjust all that, and you're like, holy shit. And then, thinking of that number 3, and then those guys don't radio back in when they're supposed to, and everybody thinks they're gone. And then they pop there, oh, sorry, we were late. But anyway, when you just think of how networked that is, because the crew on 1, crew on 2, and crew on 3, everything is synchronized within that system, but all 3 of those have to be synced. And then just the margin of error is just so small. It feels like, reading it. And then, with the kind of weapons that you guys were deploying, I mean, it's really quite a thing. And that was one of the things I really got out of that story. It's just that, yeah, this all came up. We hadn't done it before, but in a way, we'd all been there before. We'd done this in practice.
We practiced it so many times. And that target was 9.5 hours away. So we took off 9.5 hours, and we had to be on target, on time, within plus or minus 10 seconds. And understand, we never briefed with the wild weasels that were flying suppression. We never coordinated with the AWACS, the airborne radar. So many things are so integrated. And, Army guys tease Air Force guys and tease Marines and Navy. And what I realized in that whole thing was just how integrated and how phenomenal and awesome all the services can tie together. It's like when you argue with a brother or sister.
Yeah.
But then when the chips are down, it might be my brother, but um, no one's going to pick on my brother.
For sure. You guys might fight between yourselves, but you're going to be there though when they need air cover or whatever else the mission is in order to make sure the guys on the ground get what they need. So okay. Well, I think that sets up that whole piece. And so at some point then you come back. And so I didn't quite get exactly how many years were you in the military then before? So you went in 87 and then.
So it's an overlapping story. I started in 87. I left in 92 to go into, it's about a year after Desert Storm. I took my turn at Civilian World Engineering for a medical device company. And about a year after that, I kind of got back into the reserve unit as a KC 135 navigator.
Okay.
I did that for 8 years. And then I was a Air Force Academy liaison officer for the last 5 years of my career. And I just got to the point where the stack of books to study for Air Command Staff College and all that stuff and trying to raise a family, run a company. I just, I had to kind of finish my career as a major and focus on family and business at that time.
Okay. So then you come out, and I know there's a lot about Alliant Healthcare and medical sales and all that. And so that's been a very successful veteran run and owned company and those kind of pieces. But then somewhere along the way, because the hard copy of the book came out in 22, and I think you said you spent about 6 years researching and writing and working on it and doing all that kind of stuff. So 2015 or 16 somehow. So somewhere in there after you're out, this idea. So what was it that triggered you that you like, there's this huge need? I mean, what was happening?
So it was something triggered. I described when we flew that first mission and all that stuff happened and number 3 didn't show up and the lead lost his got his tail end shot off. All that combat experience and stress and everything, I put it in a box, put a bow on it. My conscious mind set it on a shelf, but my subconscious looked at it and said, "Yeah, we're going to come back to that." And so right after Desert Storm was over, I started having nightmares for about 6 months. They were just very vivid, very violent. And just as mysteriously as they started, they went away. But then 16 years later, they came back with what I describe as a vengeance. And so, they were the kind that when I say I was afraid to go to sleep, afraid is kind of a soft word. I was fearful of going to sleep, petrified, terrified of going to sleep. So I started to drink a little bit. And when that didn't help, I drank a little more. And I drank a little bit more. And over a period of time, it doesn't help. And so I got to a point where a lot of people get is like that. I'm not the version of myself I want to be. So I finally got the courage to get help. And so after a couple of years, I started getting better and better. And then I realized I was not alone. There were others with the same problem I had going through life without getting the help that I got. So the thing that you can't do is you just can't wing a book and present it to a bunch of veterans. This sometimes a tough crowd, they're going to read it and they're going to make sure I know what I'm talking about. So I spent 6 years researching and writing this book to make sure that when it got out there, it was kind of bulletproof from an accuracy standpoint. And I wanted it to be something that could really help people. So that was kind of my motivation, is to know that there were people out there that needed help. And I went through some pretty tough stuff that I've given up all my personal privacy. Getting on a podcast and talking about mental health challenges might not be in my top 10 things to do in a day, but I've decided that what am I going to do? Just keep it to myself.
Right.
And so I wrote this book, and then I've decided to go out and talk to as many people as I possibly can about it.
Yeah. So carrying that message. So I'm just rambling. So
I know, I like it.
yeah, okay. Well, then let's talk a little bit about. So here's a couple of the things that. So so the book is there, and the way just the timing of it too, Bob, because of the years in there, and then 16 years later, then this package comes to revisit you, which is really the truth, right? I mean, whatever we try to stuff away, we either deal with it
And
now or later.
it wasn't just that one box that I put on the shelf, right?
Sure,
There were
there's a whole
probably
bunch of them.
there was a bunch of them from when I was a kid. There was a
Yep.
bunch of them as I grew up. And then you get the military stuff. And,
Yeah. Well, Bob,
you
you know
know,
that in MVP, the research that they kind of look at, they're estimating between 35 and 40% of military members as they enter the military already have elements of PTSD going in based on whether it's family trauma or other lifehood kind of stuff. And so that's obviously military is not working there to heal you when you come in, they're training you
no.
to go do it. And then so
And
you just kind of pile everything on.
you can't seek help
Yeah.
when, you can't go to someone and say, I'm having these emotional problems or nightmares. They call it DNIF, duty not including flying. If I went and started sharing some of this, I would be DNIF'd, and that's the end of my flying career.
Right.
So, and I know that happens with special operators and people that are on active duty. You get yanked from your unit, and so a lot of guys just try their best to deal with it without getting professional help when they're on active duty.
Sure.
But we carry our own baggage when we go in. Go ahead, Emma.
So around the time when you're like, I'm not the person who I want to show up as anymore, was there any sort of practice or habits or things that you started to implement that like really pulled you out of it? Was it like seeking help right away? Was it like, I'm going to commit to working out every day?
So the big change for me came when I went to the VA. I met with my therapist the first time. I sat down. My legs were my sleep was so poor. I did a sleep study, and my legs were jumping 270 times an hour, just jerking. And even when I sat in the room with her, my legs were just jerking. And I told her, I said, I am going to be the best patient you ever had. I will do absolutely everything you ask me to do. And I that's what I did. I did everything she asked me to do. I talked to her still, and I talked to her about a month ago, and I said, let me ask you, if a veteran comes to you and they're struggling and they come to you, ask for help, and you develop a care plan for them and you treat them and they follow through, how many of them get better? And she said, they do the treatment? I said, yes, they listen to your advice and they follow the treatment. She said, everyone gets better. And they might not get all better, but everyone that goes and there's a plan and they follow through and they do the work, they get better. And I think that's just a phenomenal statistic.
Yeah. I mean, there's at least improvement, whatever, I'm not sure what it means to be fully healed, but moving toward that
Right.
healing process, improving your overall well-being, your physical health, and all those kind of things that we've talked about, and we will.
I didn't know that they could help you reprogram to where the nightmares would go away. I didn't know that was possible. But so some of my treatment was pharmaceutical, some of it was therapies, and but the coping therapies, that's where I spent most of my efforts, was learning about there's a funnel that they give you an image of, and at the bottom of the funnel is where the nasty stuff, the fights, whatever happens, it's where the explosion happens. And you have to kind of like assess what happened just before that. And for me, I'm not proud of it, but I would be dropping F bombs. And then, so if you're at a point where you're dropping F bombs, well, what happened just before that? So that triggered that. And then, so you just like, you start this gradual climbing a ladder out of this funnel and becoming more and more aware of what happened just before. So, so you can kind of take a left hand turn out of that cycle. And so I've become very good at that. Um, just becoming self aware of where am I emotionally. And then the other thing is, guess what? Our thoughts are not always accurate. When someone says something to us and we take it a certain way, we're not always right in that. We can misinterpret, misunderstand the meaning of what someone else says. And that's another practice that she taught me is how do you start to think differently about your situations?
Right. So, well, we talk a lot about that with our mindfulness. So we do a monthly mindfulness group with the MVP crew, and we're always talking about thoughts are just thoughts. They're not you, and they may or may not be helpful or accurate or whatever. So don't be guilty about thoughts that pop into your head, but you don't have to run with them either. Don't let them take you on this wild goose chase
Don't
just
let
because a thought comes to your,
Right.
yeah, and a lot of times those thoughts are coming from kind of the bullshit closet or the corner, and they could be negative self-talk. They could be whatever. And so you really got to double check those things and set them down. And the same thing with emotions. Emotional intelligence is something so many of that's our experience is that they've really struggled with that because they've had to suppress so much, and understanding like I'm angry and there's different variations of anger, and knowing that having an emotion is okay. It's just how am I going to respond to the emotion that I'm having, and then doing some work to understand why I'm having that emotion. And so just helping people kind of in that mindfulness kind of approach, pay more attention, become more aware of it, and then they can start to unpack some of those things. Like you said, climbing that ladder a little bit to predate before the behavior. So we always think about beliefs feed into thoughts, thoughts feed into emotions, and then emotions feed into actions. And before we get to the actions, we want to kind of like, what is all this? And then the more you can backtrack it and understand it, and we talk to guys a lot about if someone's pushing your button or some event is or some thought is, it's your button. You have to take the spring out, so you're not
Right.
getting tricked. And
It's
that's
not
really
everyone else's responsibility to
that's
make
right.
sure they, right?
Yeah.
So it's just the same thing with our health and wellness is if we eat something and it upsets our stomach, let's not eat that again.
There you go.
Let's eat things that are healthy and create well. It's the same thing with thoughts and actions.
Yeah.
And when you talk about anger, um, part of PTSD is the depression and irritability. And the irritability that I describe, it's like we all have relatives that seem to say the wrong thing at the wrong time, right? And it just irritates us. Somebody in our lives says something at the wrong time, the wrong way, and it irritates us. Well, the irritability that I'm talking about is what if everyone around you was saying the wrong thing at the wrong time? That's how that irritability feels. It just feels like everybody is just you, and it's really hard to describe to people. Depression is not sadness. It's like walking in molasses. Everything's harder. Everything's just it's like living a muted life. And then when you put the irritability, it's like walking around with thorns, walking around in a thorn field. Just everything is prickly, everything. And so, you know, it takes a huge mental shift to start looking at that whole situation differently. And, you know, I don't know if you and I discussed this, but I went through a MDMA treatment.
I was just going to
Yeah,
ask
we do.
that.
That's on our list here to chat about. So we'd love to hear more about that. So sure.
So I took for almost 12 years, I think I took SSRIs, which is an antidepressant. And okay, so now you're not dealing with molasses. But it's still it's not life full on. It's not total joy. It's just less depression and less irritability. And so what I would what I would experience, or when I got to the point where my son found someone for me to go to, and I had to stop taking my SSRI, and all of a sudden I remembered why I was taking the SSRIs, because then I had all that depression, irritability came back, and thank God my wife still loves me, because I thought we might end up getting divorced for just the few months I had to come off my SSRIs. But when I went in for my session, and there were several, this is a clinical setting. It's not like taking ecstasy off the street. But when I took that, she kind of guided me through a whole process. It was a 5 hour treatment. And I experienced something that I can only describe as an ancient healing ritual where I I was aware of almost like my spirit, my soul, and what I experienced was having that cleansed, where good energy was coming in, and I was getting rid of all this bad stuff. And that I went through about 4 or 5 cycles of that, and I was cleansed. I came out of it. The depression, the irritability was gone, gone. And so I look at February 1st of 2023 as almost like a rebirth. And from that, I can share with you that I'm experiencing life in a way that I haven't for since 2011. I've I've been able to. Um, when I was on SSRIs, it was hard for me to wake up before 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm a six. So now I'm waking up at 6:30 in the morning, and I'm alive, and I'm able to experience life like it was meant to be. And so, that's an element of this, is like we have our health and wellness to focus on. We have our therapist and our therapy, but there are other treatments out there that I want veterans to be aware of that, um, you know, I probably, I'm not um, the type of person that experimented with any of these, um, and I probably wouldn't have been the best spokesperson for something like psilocybin or MDMA, but now I am. What I experienced was this ancient ritual of forgiveness, cleansing, healing, and just a complete renewal of my life.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
So I know you're not like the actual facilitator, but just with your understanding, and now your background with um, Alliant Healthcare, can you talk a little bit about the neurological process that happens, like just in how it's like rewiring your emotions and how they are affected? It's like it's redoing the neural connections between your experience and your memories, right? Like a
Yeah.
smell or
So I can't really talk about like the neuromechanisms. I know that it's changing some of those patterns, but just the um, the experience itself, and so this energy coming in, and it was like if you were to shampoo your hair when if it's greasy or something, you wash it, and then you don't get it all out the first time, so then you have to go in and shampoo it again. It was it was just this experience of having all of this removed, all of this. I mean, I could feel it and sense this negative energy coming out of me, and I don't know what that is. I don't know what the mechanism is, but from what I experienced, it was as real as the three of us talking right now, of having this negative energy removed from myself, and um, just that feeling of being free from that. Um, my mind 100% believes that I was cleansed and rid of this depression and irritability.
The visual I get when you say that is, the Spider-Man spinoff Venom.
Yeah, yeah,
Have you seen that one, the new one?
yes, yeah,
It's like that, where it's like this actual energy leaving. And MDMA in the spiritual world, it's about opening up your heart space and feeling love and worthiness and acceptance of self on a significantly deeper level. And I think, like we've had a lot of conversations with veterans over the past few seasons with Hidden Pearls, and then we do the mindfulness meetings. But a lot of it, which you talk about in your book, is this essence of self-forgiveness and being able to hold space for yourself and to love yourself all over again.
and that, I would say that maybe that was one of the issues is I wasn't good enough at self forgiveness because I felt awesomely forgiven for it.
Mm.
It wasn't anything specific. It wasn't any one incident. It wasn't any, but I almost felt like what I was experiencing is when we die, our soul or our spirit gets to a point where all the stuff that we've kind of collected over the course of our lives gets cleansed out, gets washed out. We get forgiven, and we're perfectly clean and ready for our next life. That's how I felt. I felt like um, just being forgiven for everything that had ever gone wrong or whatever I was holding on to myself. So my shortcomings and my self forgiveness was probably enhanced by the MDMA.
Well, so we're practitioners in a therapy called internal family systems. So IFS, it was created by a guy by the name of Richard Schwartz. But kind of the theory in that it's like family systems. So he was working in therapy.
Yep.
He was working with the families, and they were trying to work with the kids. And then they realized, well, we got to do therapy with the whole family. And their notion is that each of us have these different parts within us. So there's a boyhood trauma part of me from whatever. And, these different parts. And so I'm a lawyer, I have a lawyer and a judge part. And these parts kind of come in and influence. And then, so there's these different groups, though, that they call protectors. And so they're trying to protect us from things that we really may or may not need protection from. And so when Emma says, it opens the heart space, the MDMA, it what it does in that world, it softens all the protectors. And so they kind of fall away. And now kind of the true self is able to be exposed, and then you're able to have that conversation without all that kind of confusing, the shields up, wearing different masks, telling yourself you're not good enough. All those different things kind of fall
Yep.
away during those trips and those experiences. And that, I think, at least my understanding, that's where all that healing comes in, is that because you really open that heart space and you're able to have kind of real dialogue with, but that's kind of what happens. And so that sense of being forgiven, being cleansed, being rinsed through, and then have that fuller and deeper understanding. So that's a pretty powerful experience, Bob.
Did
What was really cool is so my wife and I were on vacation down in Florida, and I went up to Chicago for the treatment. And the one thing that when I went down to Florida is I was really worried that my wife couldn't accept the fact that I was different. That's what and that's pretty emotional, but she saw how different I was. And so it's not just what it does for me, it's what it does for that relationship. It just changed the way that I saw her. You know, when you're in a good place, all of a sudden everyone around you seems like they're in a really good place. It's the opposite. It's the opposite of all the thorns, right? Now it's like instead of thorns, it's like being surrounded with love and empathy and acceptance and all these other things. And so, um, I don't know what people listening to this feel or I can just say that it's a transformational experience. I have not needed to go back on any medication. I don't feel like that. Um, I don't know if I'll ever need another treatment. Um, I probably will uh, go back through it just because um, I think what it did for me was just so awesome.
Did you ever, I know you kind of mentioned it, but did you ever do any treatments with psilocybin?
No, so the clinician that I went to for this treatment um, provides both psilocybin treatment and MDMA. Her belief for me, she assessed me of where I am, and she believed that I need to start with the MDMA, and that she thinks it's the human, it's the most human ingredient that helps us. But she also thought that maybe down in the future that psilocybin might be a good treatment for me as well.
Yeah, I went the other route. I got diagnosed, and so did the psilocybin stuff. And so my next one's the MDMA because my person, she thought, I'm not quite sure your protectors are ready to be totally set down. You might have a little, there might be some internal fighting going on. So let's ride this other one, and then we'll come back to that one. So, but
Interesting. I just the only thing I was told was that I might see a different version of myself. So I had no expectations of what was going to happen,
yeah,
and and I did have a sense like there was a guide there, a female type spirit guide that was there just to make sure I was okay. And so, I think if we're just open and accepting of these treatments, I think some good things can happen.
well, I really appreciate you sharing that story. So we'll highlight that. Well, let's see. One area I did want to talk. So there's a lot in here, and so I guess the couple pieces. So you've got some other steps toward healing, but the one that you really emphasize in at least part of it is you talk a little bit about some of the loss of tribe, and we've kind of talked about that. You lose the military tribe, and then you're trying to reconnect with a tribe that is really different. And you talk about self-image and the paradigm shift, which we've kind of talked about with the MDMA experience. You really create a new lens in which to see and interpret the world, and start relating to people in different kind of ways. And you've got a lot of pieces in there on that. There was a stress on gratitude, that keeping a gratitude journal and/or just really being focused and appreciating the things in our life that we that are positive, because there are some things, and it's hard when you're under that cloud sometimes to kind of see all those things. And then there's a section on building a healthy life, and I guess this is what one of them. Were there any other pieces or steps to your process of the self-forgiveness? So in our world, so we talk about, so I'm kind of I'm a what we call a restorative facilitator. So I've done a lot of work with crime victims and the folks who've offended, and worked on issues around forgiveness and that process and doing all that. And we've done a series. We did a 3-part workshop with the MVP crew on forgiveness. And so we started with self-forgiveness and kind of the unique aspects about that. And then we talked about our process of forgiving others. And then there's a third step about asking others to forgive us, or at least trying to make amends with those that we've offended. So
Right.
that kind of category. And we have some steps within each one of those kind of categories. So I just wondered, so the self-forgiveness piece is pretty important, because in that section, because once we really got into that, and in those workshops, people were really talking about the guilt and shame that they carried about something either they did or didn't do right. And it might have been part of the military, or there might have been multiple kind of things. And working through that, and just this notion, we have this such individualistic kind of macho perspective on it. You know what I mean? It's like always advancing, always grinding, and you don't have time for those kind of things. But people do carry this guilt and shame. And if you can't, set that backpack down, and redo it. The psych person for MVP, she always talks about that. It's like when you're going on a mission, right? You got the rucksack and it's got the stuff you need for that mission. Well, now that you're out of the military, you don't need to carry all that same shit that you had while you're in the, you got to repack your rucksack. So you have the tools and the stuff you need for your current mission, which is not the same as that. And so it's some of those kind of pieces, but that was really, I think, profound for us as part of, we were kind of facilitating that group and the work that people did around that, and trying to kind of relieve some of those issues. So I just want to give you a little bit of time here. If there's anything else on
Sure.
self-forgiveness in that process.
So, there's a couple things. Veterans at times can be their own worst enemy, right? So we talk about the loss of tribe. I don't know what it is, but for whatever reason, we don't seek help because we leave the military. We think we have to solve all our problems on our own. And what's bizarre about that is absolutely nothing that we learn in the military teaches us that. Everything
Every
we do,
mission every mission has a team.
everything we do is as part of a team.
Right.
But when we get out, we think we have to solve all of our problems on our own. And I don't know what that is, but that's a really big mindset that we have to invite people into our lives, and we have to invite people into walking alongside of us. And sometimes we get that by doing things that are greater than ourselves. I wrote that we feel more meaningful when we're helping others, when we're part of a team, and when we're aspiring to be something greater or helping them be greater. So that's one thing, is that loss of tribe. We got to fight that. We got to fight that feeling like we have to solve it ourselves, and really start to reconnect. And that gratitude that we talk about is be grateful for the people that you're with. Be grateful, because two things cannot occupy your mindset at the same time. You cannot, it's impossible to feel gratitude and at the same time wallow in misery. Those two emotions can't exist at the same time. And so um, that's part of it. And the same goes true for forgiveness, right? If we're practicing self forgiveness, we can't ruminate on all the things we've done that are bad. And that's one of the things, one of the habits of veterans is they'll blame themselves for something that I should have been on that mission. I could have protected John, or, had I been there, he wasn't supposed to be there, whatever it was. I have some things that, I could have been a better crewmate. I did, said, wasn't, you know, I hold myself accountable for some things that maybe I could have done or said differently. I try really hard not to push religion as part of, I try not to press that out on other people. But every Sunday I go to church. The first thing we do is forgiveness. We confess that there are things that we have done and things that we've left undone, things that we've said, or we have not loved people as we loved ourselves, all those things. And then we receive forgiveness. And it's a ritualistic practice of seeking forgiveness. Well, we can do that on our own too. We can just internally say, I'm a human being. I obviously didn't mean to do that. I let someone down. I need to forgive myself. And one of the practices I've seen is to handwrite the thing that you feel that you did that was wrong. You write it down on a piece of paper, and then you go to a little fire and you burn it. And it just has this mental imagery of just burning that part of you that you hold so hard against yourself. And then when I talked about that funnel and being self-aware, we have to be self-aware of when we're ruminating. When that rumination is just, it's like that loop and re-loop of something. And I do that a lot. I hold myself to a very high standard. And when I fall short of this high standard, that I get caught in that loop. And we have to recognize when we're in that loop, and self-talk our way out of it. Some of the stuff that we talk about, Coach, is it's really individual responsibility of learning how to recognize certain situations and then taking the action of what can I do. And so the practices of gratitude, of self-forgiveness, and all those practices are different coping skills. Those are all just tools in the toolbox of when we recognize that we're in this situation. Okay, that I need my hammer, go get the hammer and I hammer it out. Or, oh, I need my screwdriver and that's what I'm going to do. And we just have to, when we were in the military, we were trained in things that we never thought about. How to fly towards where the enemy is firing at us, how to fly at 200 feet above the ground. I mean, some really difficult stuff, but we were trained to do it. Well, our lives, the quality of our lives after service relies on us learning new tools, being trained in how to do things. And the unfortunate thing when I talk to veterans, sometimes the last thing I want to hear about is practicing gratitude or practicing self-forgiveness or practicing, it's like, who needs that?
Right.
But that's really our score in life, our quality of life is going to be on how well we learn these new tools and tricks on how to really succeed in life. And I'm not talking about just getting a job and getting through the day. I'm talking about, do you really want to have an awesome life? Do you want to have an awesome marriage? Do you want to experience your children's lives in ways that you never thought possible? Because all that's available to us. And I mean, even my experience since, my MDNA experience, my life is different in ways that I never could have predicted. And I had already been getting better. And it just kind of opened my eyes that there is so much more to be had in life than what we even realize.
Even here, just thinking about you saying that, like, I feel like even for civilians or like those of us who are not veterans or have never served, I think we get so used to this kind of level of existing and like telling ourselves that it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And so I guess I would also just note that if, even if you're not a veteran, looking at these other therapies and really taking self-forgiveness seriously can drastically change your life. And you have no idea how wonderful things could be on the other side of that. And Bob, I know you also listed a mantra that you like to use around forgiveness and like another practice that was in your book. I should have written it down. I did not. But I feel like we were talking about this and we feel like you need to have a forgiveness workbook along with this book where we can like go through some journal prompts or something like that because you offer so much. And even just hearing you talk about it now. So
Yeah, it's like, so we have a worksheet for each one of those different stages of forgiveness. And just so, because one of the practices, so in MVP, they don't like to call them tools. They want to call them practices because it suggests that you're trying them every day. But, anyway, but the writing part is super important. So like if it's self-forgiveness, just writing out, what it is that you're feeling, so if I'm feeling guilty or shameful or whatever that is, doing the writing and just exhaust that whole thing out and then unpacking that, there's some questions behind all that kind of stuff. And then going through a process of doing that, it's like the loving kindness kind of meditation process. So you start with yourself and then you work with somebody else and then somebody more difficult, so pretty soon the more you do that and you're wishing peace and well-being and all that kind of stuff on others, you can finally start to accept it kind of for yourself in that way. And it honestly, that took me a long time to get there.
Yeah, the practice of gratitude is one of those journaling things too.
Yep.
And people don't necessarily understand what happens when you write something down. It's not write it down because we want to be a pain in the butt. It's because your mind makes a connection when you write something and you see it written. It's like a confirmation. And so when you write a gratitude list, it's more concrete in your mind. And when you write down something that you want to be forgiven for, or something that you're letting go, or you write down a new practice that you want to do, or something that you want to be better at, um, or setting a goal. Writing a goal is much better than just thinking a goal.
Yeah. And I think too, for the other negative aspects of stuff that we're trying to release, I think there's a therapeutic release of that. As you write it, I think it helps emotionally and cognitive to begin the process of letting that kind of go. As you write it out, there's a reality to it, like you said, and it makes it really concrete. And there is this kind of creating the sense of release and freeing yourself from whatever that was to some extent. So, okay. Well, all right. Well, then let's see. I'm just going to check in. So we're a full hour in. And then do you want to reload for a second? So here's the stuff I've got left. I have other steps toward healing. So you got the get moving, don't isolate your nervous system, the broader wellness steps with all those kind of pieces. We got some mental stability stuff, pieces on reconnecting, and then new mission and purpose and all that kind of stuff. So there's a whole bunch in there. I don't know I'm willing to kind of whatever energy level you have, Bob. So I think there's a lot there. And if we want to get into some more detail, then maybe we should come back and find a way to wrap this one up a little bit. And then we could do another one and kind of maybe dive in a little bit deeper to some of those, the bigger wellness practices that you've got listed in here and just talk about some of your experience with those. Does that sound?
I am absolutely open to, I just find I find a real synergy in what you guys are doing. And I enjoy talking with you because of that shared experience and what you're trying to do. And, I haven't really refined what it is how I'm going to do this. Right. So I think at some point, I've got this book and I'm not just trying to hawk a book, not just trying to get I'm trying to make a difference in not just the veterans' lives. My getting better helped my wife, and my getting better helped my children, and my getting better helped my colleagues. It helps the people that I work with. And so I just want to share that. I want to be able to work with people like yourselves and find more and more ways of getting, because as I listen to you talk, I haven't heard you say one thing, not one thing that is antithetical to what I'm trying to communicate. If anything, it's an enhancement, and I'm learning from you along the lines of all the messages I've tried to put together. And that makes me feel really good.
Well, good. It makes us feel good too. And really that's kind of why we could do a part 2 in a sense. It would get to the Hidden Pearls Health. And then there's a whole set of wellness practices that really dovetail. And I think they apply to not just veterans, but to, they're really wholesale
Absolutely.
kind of abroad the board kind of thing. So, and I really want to, go ahead, Amy.
No, I would just say, I think everything that you're doing is why we want to start why we are starting Hidden Pearls Health. And I was just, this whole time I've just been thinking about, because it's going to be like a wellness platform and then an app. And this entire time I was like, you would be such a good teacher, or to have a series with you, all about forgiveness and these different practices, and actually some guided meditations or some guided journal prompts. And so yeah, I mean, even past this interview, we'd love to collaborate with you on filming.
Yeah, if you ever want me to, I can get down to Nashville at any time. So
but it'd be really to have some 10 or 15 minute, just kind of, you summarize some different points from your perspective and what you're trying to accomplish and how the book fits into that. We just having a series of things from you on that we could kind of list on the platform. And I was just going to say about the impact on, so my brother-in-law, so husband to my wife's sister, but anyway, so longtime educator, but always in the Army National Guard, but 2 deployments, he was a major colonel when he was done, all that kind of stuff, long time in. and really harrowing deployments. I mean, frontline stuff and all that kind of thing throughout the whole thing. And when the time periods that he was gone, his kids were in, junior high and high school. So they had 4 kids, and there's that whole thing, so family home at a war that, at best is kind of being allowed, but, not super supported and all that kind of stuff. And then his transition back, and, we've spent time talking about that, and he's been on some of the MVP stuff. He's still kind of in stages on his own healing journey and all that kind of thing. But, just listening to the stories about him returning and like not being able to go into a parking lot because of, roadside bomb, just how he had been trained for so long, and so many things that you think about, and reaching for your, weapon and all that stuff. And then how that impacts his nightmares at home with family and all that kind of thing. So, that is so huge. And so the more that we can assist with that, helping and healing, and then just recognizing too the trauma that was inflicted on the families, just about the absence, about not knowing, the risk of death, and then just dealing with all the things in life that go on as your family's trying to survive while, your loved one is deployed. So there's a whole package there. So, well, let's do that then. So we're going to regroup. So we've kind of done the forgiveness. We've set the stage, I think, really well about the new tribe that you enter into and the difficulty about coming back into that other tribe. And then we'll come back and look at some of these other practices that can really help regenerate. And I guess on the MDMA thing, I just want to suggest there is MVP, the program coordinator for Las Vegas.
Bruno.
Yeah, Bruno. He is finishing his doctorate at the University of New Mexico in psychedelic modalities. And so he's doing a monthly veterans retreat with men's group with introduction to, kind of the.
It's not MDMA, it's something.
Yeah, I've got a Marine who is really suffering that I want to kind of, he's just crying for help, and I want to get him some help. So maybe after this is over, we can talk about how to get that connected. The one thing I want to point out is I start every speech that I give with a little survey, and I ask who's serving, active, reserve, or guard. And then I ask who's ever served, and then I open it up to who's family member. It's like 80% of us are connected to a veteran in some way. 7% of the population of the United States is a veteran. About 22 million veterans in the U.S. And we're 80% of the population is connected to a veteran. So the most important thing that I think we can point out is this is not just a veteran issue. Just like you pointed out, your brother-in-law, it's not just the impact of him, which is significant enough, right? All the things that he's dealing with, it's so challenging. But the impact that it has on other family members, it's not just his spouse, it's his kids, and it's his friends. And, we lose friends over this stuff. They can't relate to what we're going through. And what do I do about that? So there needs to be a paradigm shift within the community. And I talk about this. I mentioned earlier that the recruiting numbers are down by 25%. They're going to be off by even more in 2024. And it's because we're not fulfilling our promise. A veteran going in has a 50-50 chance of coming out with some kind of struggle, relationship, mental health, whatever it is. 50-50 chance. That's just, how can we do that as a society, right? And so there has to be a paradigm shift, not only with the veterans, but in our communities. And the reason that I wrote the book was because I didn't see out there anyone that was providing a roadmap of there's a lot of veteran service organizations that do great work, but there's no roadmap And that's all I tried to do was lay out a roadmap. Here's some things to think about. And if they can find organizations like yours and other areas where they can find help, but we have to go through a shift in our society that it's not just about veterans surviving. Veterans have the raw materials to be the most successful and wealthy people in our country. They have the best talent of anyone that I could hire. So why are we accepting this existence, and instead of being at the top of the heap, they're at the bottom? And so I guess that's just my closing argument is that there needs to be a paradigm shift. I want to be part of it. I spent 6 years trying to research and put down in words things that I think if can be part of the solution.
Indeed. And I guess, and just to close, and I don't mean it to be a real somber note, but we didn't really talk in detail about the rate of veteran suicide. And I would just say, though, in working with my brother-in-law, one of the, of all the things that he dealt with overseas and the deployments and being gone from his family, in the years that he's been back, it's dealing with comrades who now have been lost by suicide in the States afterwards, and the number of that. And I know you've got a graph in the book and all that kind of stuff, but the numbers are just really outrageous. And so
staggering.
Just
22 veterans die every day from suicide. Even worse, 640 are attempting suicide, and 1,800 veterans every day are actively planning their suicide. So when you talk about mindset,
yeah,
you can't be planning your suicide if you're going to be experiencing a happy, successful life. And we got to change that. That's, when you look at that funnel, we want to be working with those guys and the 5,500 veterans on average every day who are just thinking about it.
Yep.
So it's not necessarily somber. It's shocking. It's something that we should just be awakened by that.
How can this
driven
happen?
to
I mean, that
Yeah.
when you read those stats and then you're around it and then you hear the story, it's just like, how can this be going on? So, well, all right. So, well, Bob, I just want to say thank you so much, and just your heartfelt love and compassion, for vets, and just your own experience and the healing journey that you've been on, and your willingness to share that journey with us. We're really grateful for that. So we're going to tie this one up, and we'll knot that. And then I'll kind of redo our script a little bit, and we'll kind of come back with some of those real practical kind of day-to-day things that people can look at and categories and those kind of things, and give somebody, we'll try to paint that roadmap out a little bit more, and with a picture of kind of holistically how they can kind of do that. And for us too, I mean, it really overlaps with a lot of the core components of our Hidden Pearls Health stuff and some of the things that we're thinking about. So, so we're super grateful. Emma, any final?
Well, since we're going to have you on a second time, the way we like to end our episodes are, what hidden pearls are you experiencing now? Like, is there any hidden pearls of hope, or, what's giving you hope right now? So I'm going to ask you this again the next time you're on, but
Sure.
What's giving you hope right now?
I just happen to be a hope person. Okay. So, I look at the world as filled with hope. So I look at all these challenges, but what I see when I speak to a group, inevitably someone walks up to me and they share that maybe they had trouble with alcohol and they're coming around. My therapist told me that someone had read my book and had decided that they were going to change their approach to life. I started bawling when I heard that, because what an awesome thing to hear. So that fills me with hope that the work that you are doing is reaching people. The work that I'm doing is reaching people and helping to change someone's life. I get back 10 times what I put into it, but I'm filled with hope that we are taking the right steps to try and help people.
Yeah. And it's great when you do hear that, even if it's, even if the numbers, you don't know all the numbers, but when you do hear the one or two or whatever it may be, or more than that, it's a big deal for somebody to decide to start making changes in their life and giving them hope about the possibility for them. So that's a really powerful thing. So, well, good. Well, we're hopeful. I'm hopeful because you're out there spreading the word, and that's pretty cool. So that's really fun. And again, your passion and love for vets and their families and trying to make a difference. So that's pretty cool. And we are very honored to be a part of that and to have you on the show. So that's really good. So we will redo that. All right. So we're all set. So I'll coordinate with your entire team, and we'll try to get another date here in the next few weeks so we could kind of tie this up. It'd be great to push them out, maybe in weeks back to back, but anyway, we'll talk about that. But so we'll get with everything like that. So really appreciate it, Bob.
Three words that you use that I feel: gratitude, hope, and I am very honored to have shared this time with you.
Oh, very good. So mutual. So thank you. All right. So we'll reload. You have a super great night. And again, congratulations on the anniversary. And honestly, you know what? All the stuff, when you tell me about your trip and then how it just impacted your overall life and then your relationship with your wife, that's pretty powerful. So that's such a gift at this stage in life after you've been kind of living in that.
Magical.
Yeah, super magical. So anyway, very grateful for that and appreciative. So, all right. Well, take care, Bob. We'll reconnect soon and we'll get to the second part of this story. So thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.